I was never the favorite. From the moment my younger brother, Daniel, was born, it was clear to everyone, our parents, our relatives, even the family dog, that he was the golden child. He had the bright, shining smile that could charm the world, while I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, the one who learned early on that love in our family was conditional. Daniel could do no wrong. He was the golden boy who could set fire to the curtains and still get a kiss on the forehead. I, on the other hand, had to be perfect just to be acknowledged. I learned early to expect nothing. "David, you should help your brother with his homework," my mother would say, even though Daniel was praised for being the gifted one. I would help him, and later at dinner, my parents would proudly tell everyone how brilliant Daniel was. My name was rarely mentioned. By the time I was 18, I had mastered the art of being invisible. When I graduated high school with honors, my parents didn't even throw a party. But when Daniel barely scraped through his final year, they invited the whole neighborhood to celebrate. "He worked so hard," they said. "He's such a fighter." I left for college without any fanfare. They didn't help me pack. They didn't cry at the airport. They simply waved me off like I was leaving for a weekend trip, not a new life. Daniel stayed behind, living in the comfort of our parents' home, where he was adored, pampered, and endlessly supported. He had big dreams. He wanted to start a business, he wanted to be an artist, he wanted to travel. He just never actually did anything. I, on the other hand, had to claw my way to every opportunity. I worked 2 jobs while studying business in college, eating instant noodles in a cramped apartment while Daniel had steak dinners at home. My parents sent him money freely, while I didn't even get a phone call. Still, I never asked for anything. I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned to build my own future. And I did. After college, I started a small business in real estate development. It wasn't glamorous at first, but I poured my heart into it, working long hours, taking risks, making smart deals. While Daniel was busy finding himself at home, I was building something real. By the time I was 30, I had done it. I was rich. Not just comfortable, but truly wealthy. I owned properties across the city, had a penthouse overlooking the skyline, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. Then, just as I was settling into my success, my parents called. Not to congratulate me. Not to finally recognize my hard work. They needed money. Daniel had made a bad investment. A really bad one. He had taken out loans, used my parents' house as collateral, and now they were about to lose everything. I should have said no. But when I looked at my mother, her voice trembling, her eyes full of something that almost looked like regret, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a longing to be seen. To finally be the son they could be proud of. So I saved them. I paid off the loans. I bought the house back under my name. I gave Daniel more money than I should have, convincing myself he'd learn his lesson. But he didn't. He wasted it. He threw lavish parties. He spent it all on get-rich-quick schemes. And when the money ran out, my parents called again. "David," my mother's voice was soft, almost pleading. "He's your brother. You need to help him." I almost laughed. Where was this kindness when I needed it? Where was this desperation when I was working until dawn, trying to survive while Daniel lived in comfort? But still, something in me hesitated. Not because I loved them. But because I wanted them to love me. So I helped again. And again. And again. Until the day I finally realized the truth. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. That was the day I changed. That was the day I decided that if they were going to treat me like an ATM, then I would start charging interest. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left behind. After years of being the forgotten son, I had finally become something more than an afterthought. But it wasn't love that brought my family back to me, it was desperation. And desperation was a powerful thing. Daniel continued to burn through every cent I gave him. He had no sense of consequence because there never were any. My parents bailed him out of every failure, just like they always had. And now, since they were financially drained, they expected me to do the same. I played along for a while, giving him money in small doses, just to see how fast he could lose it. It was fascinating, really, his ability to waste thousands in a matter of weeks. Investments that went nowhere, business ideas that never materialized, expensive vacations that he justified as networking opportunities. And through it all, my parents kept telling me, he's trying, David. He just needs more time. I didn't argue. I didn't fight them. I just smiled and waited. Because, for the first time, I held the power. And I was going to use it. The last loan. One evening, I invited Daniel to my penthouse for dinner. He arrived late, of course, dressed in designer clothes he couldn't afford, talking about his big plans, like always. "You look good," I said, pouring us both a drink. "Still driving that Porsche?" He smirked, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Of course. What's the point of making money if you don't spend it?" He said it like he had made any money at all. "I hear you need another loan," I said, leaning back in my chair. "How much this time?" Daniel chuckled, as if this was all a casual game. "Just $100,000, he said. "It's a guaranteed win. A new startup, crypto trading. Huge potential, man. We'd be rich." I raised an eyebrow. "We?" "Well, yeah," he said with an easy grin. "You invest, I make the moves. 50-50 split. Family business, right?" I swirled my drink, pretending to think it over. "And what happens if it fails?" Daniel waved a dismissive hand. "It won't. But even if it does, you can afford it. What's $100,000 to you?" I looked at him for a long moment. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "You're right, Daniel. $100,000 is nothing to me." His eyes lit up. "But here's the thing," I continued. "I'm not giving you another cent." His smile faltered. "What?" I set my glass down, the sound sharp in the silence. "I'm done funding your failures." For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely stunned. "But, you always." "Not anymore." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Come on, man. Don't be like that. We're brothers." I let out a soft chuckle. "Are we? Because for years, you were just the golden child, and I was the backup plan. You never needed me before. And now that you do, it's funny how suddenly we're brothers again." His jaw clenched. "So that's it? You're just gonna turn your back on your own family?" I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city I had built my success in. "No," I said. "You and Mom and Dad turned your backs on me a long time ago. I just finally learned to stop chasing after you." Daniel was silent for a long time. Then, his voice turned sharp. "Fine," he said. "You want to act like you're better than us? Go ahead. But don't come crying when you realize family is all you've got." I turned to face him, my expression calm. "Funny," I said. "I was going to say the same thing to you." After that night, Daniel stopped calling. My parents stopped calling. I had expected them to put up a fight, to try to manipulate me into helping them again. But something strange happened. They turned on me. At first, it was just passive-aggressive comments from relatives, things like, "David thinks he's too good for his own blood," or "money changes people," whispered at family gatherings I didn't attend. Then it escalated. I heard from mutual friends that my parents were telling everyone I had abandoned them. That I was selfish and ungrateful. That after everything they had done for me, I had the audacity to let my own brother struggle. The irony nearly killed me. And then, the final blow came. Daniel lost everything. His debts caught up with him. The banks took what little he had left. He was drowning in unpaid loans, and suddenly, his golden charm wasn't enough to save him anymore. That's when my parents came to me. Not with humility. Not with regret. But with expectation. "You have to help him," my mother said, standing in my office like it was her company, not mine. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Why?" She looked offended. "Because he's your brother." I gave a slow nod. "Right. And where was my brother when I was struggling to put myself through college? Where were you when I needed help?" "That was different," she said. "You never asked." I almost laughed. "I never asked because I knew the answer." She sighed, shaking her head as if I was the disappointment. "I don't understand you, David. Family isn't about keeping score." "No," I agreed. "But it is about loyalty. And you made it clear a long time ago where your loyalty was." My father, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "Fine," he said. "If you won't help, we'll find another way." I shrugged. "Go ahead." And that was the last time I saw them. At least, until they lost the house. A few months later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. But something in me wanted to hear it. "David," my mother's voice was small. Weak. "It's all gone." I already knew. The house, the one I had secretly bought back under my name, had finally been foreclosed on. The debts were too high. The bills had piled up. And now, they had nothing. "We have nowhere to go," she continued. "We were hoping." I let the silence stretch, making her say it. She swallowed. "We were hoping you'd let us stay with you. Just until we get back on our feet." I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. For so many years, I had wanted this. Not their suffering, but the acknowledgement. The moment where they realized I was the one they needed. But now that it was here, I felt nothing. I exhaled slowly. Then, calmly, I said, "No." Silence. Then, "David, please." I hung up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just free. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I had never needed them. They had always needed me. Silence. For the first time in my life, the weight of my family was gone. No more late-night guilt trips. No more phone calls filled with fake concern. No more being expected to clean up the messes of the golden child. I was free. And yet, there was a part of me, a small, buried part, that wondered if I had made the right choice. Not because I doubted myself. But because I had spent so many years chasing after their approval that walking away felt foreign. A week after I refused to take them in, my parents and Daniel showed up at my office. Uninvited. I should have expected it. My secretary, Olivia, buzzed in through the intercom. "Sir, there are some guests here to see you." I sighed. "Let me guess. They're insisting it's urgent," she said. I could hear the tension in her voice. I almost told her to call security. But instead, I said, "Send them in. Might as well get this over with." When they walked in, they looked different. My father, once a proud, authoritative man, looked smaller. His usual confidence had been chipped away. My mother, whose voice had always been so sharp and cutting, was quiet. And Daniel, he looked like a shell of the brother I had once known. His suit, once designer, always pristine, was wrinkled, the cuffs slightly frayed. His face, usually smug, was hollowed out with stress. For the first time, he looked older than me. I leaned back in my chair, watching them. To what do I owe the pleasure? Daniel clenched his jaw. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I arched an eyebrow. "Enjoying what?" "Seeing us like this." I studied them. Maybe, once, I would have. Maybe the younger, angrier version of me would have taken pleasure in their downfall. But now? I felt nothing. "I don't enjoy anything about this," I said calmly. "But I do find it interesting that you're only here now. After everything. After years of ignoring me, after years of making it clear who you really cared about, now, you suddenly remember I exist?" "We didn't come to fight," my mother said, voice weary. "We came to ask for another chance." "A chance for what?" I asked. "To be my parents? To be my brother? Or just to use me again?" My father exhaled sharply. "David, we made mistakes. We know that now." I almost laughed. "Now you know? Now that you're broke? Now that Daniel has finally run out of people to manipulate?" I shook my head. "No. You don't regret how you treated me. You regret that it didn't work out for you." Daniel, who had been silent, suddenly snapped. "You're acting like we abused you," he spat. "Like we didn't do anything for you. You had a roof over your head. You had food. You." "I had nothing, Daniel," I cut him off. "Nothing but scraps. And when I finally built something for myself, you all decided it was your right to take from me. Tell me, how does it feel now? To have nothing?" His hands curled into fists. I smiled. There it was, the truth they never wanted to admit. They had needed me. And now that I was done playing their game, they were finally feeling the weight of what they had lost. My mother tried one last time. "David, please. We're family." I stood up. "No," I said simply. "We were family once. A long time ago. But now?" I buttoned my suit jacket. "Now, we're just strangers with shared DNA." And then, without another word, I walked out of my own office, leaving them there, just like they had left me my entire life. They didn't try again. Maybe they finally understood that I wasn't the backup plan anymore. Maybe they realized that I wasn't going to be their safety net. Or maybe, just maybe, they saw me for what I truly was. A man they couldn't control. And that was what scared them the most. I heard through distant relatives that my parents moved in with an old friend. That Daniel tried to start another business but failed again. That the golden child had finally lost his shine. And I thrived. Without their weight, I grew stronger. I expanded my business, traveled the world, built a life that was entirely my own. For the first time, I was truly, completely free. And I never looked back. Months passed. Then a year. I thought about them less and less. My parents. Daniel. The house I had bought back and let slip through their fingers. The golden child who had finally lost his crown. Their voices, once etched into my every decision, had faded into distant echoes. Their approval, once the thing I chased like a starving man chasing a meal, had lost all meaning. And for the first time, I was living for myself. I poured my energy into my business, expanding my real estate empire beyond what I had ever imagined. I bought properties overseas, built connections with the most powerful investors, and became the kind of man who never had to beg for a seat at the table. Because now, I owned the table. And I was finally, truly at peace. Until the funeral. It was my father. A heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected. I almost didn't go. But something, some old obligation, some forgotten version of myself, pushed me to show up. When I arrived at the small funeral home, I recognized none of the faces. The people mourning him were not his people. They were old friends, acquaintances, distant relatives who had drifted in and out of his life. Daniel and my mother sat at the front. My mother was quiet, grief-stricken. Daniel looked exhausted. When he saw me, his face hardened. But he didn't say anything. And for that, I was grateful. I sat in the back, listening to the speeches. They spoke of my father as if he had been a great man. A leader. A pillar of strength. But I knew the truth. He had been a man of choices. And he had chosen Daniel. He had chosen the golden child over the son who had worked himself to the bone. And that was why, even as I sat there, watching them lower his casket into the ground, I felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. No regret. Just acceptance. After the burial, as the mourners drifted away, I felt a presence beside me. Daniel. We stood in silence, watching the grave. Then, finally, he spoke. "I guess you won." I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "What?" He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You won, David. You have everything. Money. Success. The life we all wanted." I studied him. His suit was worn at the edges. The expensive watch he used to flaunt was gone. The cocky confidence he had carried his whole life had been replaced with something else. Something dangerously close to resentment. "This wasn't a competition, Daniel," I said, my voice even. "I never wanted to win. I just wanted a fair chance." He scoffed. "Well, you got that and more, didn't you?" I sighed. "Daniel, do you even understand what happened? Why things turned out this way?" He turned to me, his jaw tight. "You got rich, and we didn't." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I worked. And you wasted every opportunity handed to you. And Mom and Dad let you. That's the difference." For a moment, something flashed in his eyes, something dangerously close to realization. But then it was gone. He exhaled sharply. "It doesn't matter anymore." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." We stood there for a moment longer, the weight of our shared past hanging between us. Then, without another word, Daniel turned and walked away. And I let him. I never saw Daniel or my mother again after that. I heard things, of course. That Daniel moved to another city, chasing a new life. That my mother went with him. But I never reached out. And they never called. And that, I realized, was okay. Because I was finally, completely, free. For years, I had fought for something that had never existed, a family that truly loved me. But I didn't need them anymore. I had built something greater. A life of my own. And as I walked away from my father's grave, stepping into the bright sunlight, I knew, without a doubt. I was never looking back. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.